on each side.
All right. So a little bit complex here, but this isn't the Armstrong variable adjustment orifice on these lever action shock absorbers. Okay, so point to the shaft that we're rotating with this solenoid. So there's a little round shaft and that has a flat cut on either side of it, and that is the valve that goes into the body of the shock absorber and gives us up to 4 different positions of relative stiffness on the shock absorber. Each one of the different colored wires represents a different stiffness control. This tab that is being rotated by the solenoid has a single conductor on it. Point to that conductor there, and 180 degrees away it has another conductor identical to the first one. In order to go through all four positions, it only has to rotate 180 degrees. And indeed, the valve itself that's being rotated goes through all 4 positions in 180 degrees. Show how that blade slips between the contacts here, Steve, with your... So when that rotates in between the green contacts, it makes a momentary contact and activates the solenoid once. The green actually is the highest strength, the highest valving, so the most resistance. So it's interesting that although 180 degrees away, the contacts are on the white wire, which is the softest setting where we start, that in fact, after turning it 1 degree in the, show us the plate up there, 1 degree in the clockwise direction actually starts out with the stiffest setting, and then less stiff, and then less stiff, and then back to the least stiff setting where it is right now. Now we've got this thing, we had to redo some continuity and do some other checks, but we're all electrically hooked up and ready to rotate. So if you'll activate to the first position to the right, and it goes from the strongest. Oh, now it is at the strongest. It was on the softest. So now we're at the strongest setting. 1 more activation, and it goes to the next weakest. 1 more activation, please. To the next weakest, and then finally the white wire. So, and now we're conducting to the white wire, which is the least strength valve setting. Now hit it again. Now we're again at the strongest with 1 rotation right. The next rotation gives us the next strongest resistance. 3rd gives us the next strongest, and then finally back to the soft, which is the vertical setting on the gauge. Soft, that's normal ride position, and indeed the conduction is to the white wire on both units. So we saw that these are synchronously operating now after quite a bit of work. We actually point to the new screw that you had to put in, Steve. We were having problems with the conductivity on this switch mechanism here. That particular terminal had fatigued, primarily due to the rivet going through it. We had to replace that rivet with a tiny screw in order to bring the tension down. But all of the rest of them are contacting very well, and now this one even better. Of course, all of this, affects the resistance of this lever arm. And we actually physically tested it to make sure that on the highest setting it had X amount of resistance, on the lowest setting it had Y. And there was definitely a significant difference. So we know where we're at. The only counterintuitive thing about the whole thing is the switch itself, which is now on soft. You turn it 1 position to the right, the 2nd position, and of course that is the hardest setting, then medium, then low, and then back to the lowest setting at the top. So that's a little counterintuitive, but as long as you remember that, that should be fine. So that's the story.